The first attack came on a Tuesday morning in the mining colony of New Horizon. 3,000 humans lived there, working the rich ore deposits that made life possible on the frontier worlds. By Wednesday morning, not a single one remained alive. Commander stood in the ruins of what had been the colony's central square. The buildings around her were nothing but burned shells. The ground was scorched black, but what disturbed her most was the silence. A place where thousands of people had lived and worked and raised their families was now as quiet as a tomb. Her assistant, Lieutenant, walked up beside her with a data pad in his hands. His face was pale and his hands were shaking slightly. "We've finished the preliminary scans, Commander. The radiation signature matches disruptor weapons." Nodded slowly. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made her stomach turn. The hegemony was one of the most powerful alien civilizations in the known galaxy. They had ships that could move faster and hit harder than anything humanity possessed, and apparently they had decided that human colonies made excellent targets. "Any survivors?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer. "None, Commander. We found no bodies either. The disruptors don't leave much behind." Looked out at the devastation and felt a cold anger building in her chest. 3,000 people had woken up yesterday morning with plans for their day, hopes for their future, dreams for their children. Now they were just a statistic in her report. She pulled out her communicator and connected to Earth's United Colonial Command headquarters. The face that appeared on the small screen belonged to Admiral, the head of Colonial Defense. He looked tired and worried. "Commander, what did you find?" "Weapons signatures confirmed, Admiral. Complete destruction of the colony. No survivors." Closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, saw something she had never seen in the old Admiral before. Fear. "This is the third attack this month, Commander. 442B lost 2 settlements last week. III lost 1. That's over 12,000 people dead in 30 days. Felt the weight of those numbers press down on her shoulders. "Do we have any idea where they're operating from? How they're getting past our detection systems?" "None. Their stealth technology is decades ahead of ours. By the time we detect them, they're already gone, and the government claims they know nothing about any attacks." Of course they did. They were masters of deception. Their diplomats would smile and offer condolences while their death squads prepared the next massacre. It was a strategy as old as warfare itself, but that didn't make it any less effective. "What are our options, Admiral?" His expression grew even grimmer. "Right now, we have 300 colonies spread across 40 star systems. Our entire fleet can't be everywhere at once. We can increase patrols, add more sensor stations, train more soldiers. But until we know where these attacks are coming from, we're just playing defense. And on defense, we lose." The next 6 months were the darkest period in humanity's short history among the stars. The attacks continued with terrible regularity. Sometimes a week would pass without incident, and people would begin to hope that maybe it was over. Then 3 colonies would die in a single night, and the hope would turn to ash. The casualty reports crossed 20,000, then 30, then 40. Watched the numbers climb with a mixture of horror and fury. She had joined the Office of Colonial Intelligence to protect people, but she felt utterly helpless. Every day she went to work knowing that somewhere out there, humans were dying and she could do nothing to stop it. The death squads operated like ghosts. They appeared without warning, killed without mercy, and vanished without a trace. The only evidence they left behind was the distinctive radiation signature of their weapons and the silence of the dead. Human intelligence agencies worked around the clock, analyzing every scrap of data, following every lead, but they found nothing. The aliens were simply too good at hiding. Then, one rainy evening, a young signals analyst named David walked into his office with a data pad and a nervous expression. "Commander, I think I found something." Looked up from the report she had been reading. Was new to her team, fresh out of the academy with more enthusiasm than experience. But there was something in his eyes that made her pay attention. "Show me." Pulled up a complex display of wave patterns on his data pad. "I've been studying the communication bursts we've intercepted over the past year. We can't decode them. Their encryption is way beyond anything we can crack. But I noticed something interesting." He pointed to a series of peaks and valleys in the wave pattern. Every transmission creates a unique quantum interference signature, like a fingerprint. I started mapping these fingerprints, tracking when and where they appeared. Leaned forward, "Go on." "At first I just saw chaos, signals bouncing all over the place with no pattern. But then I realized I was looking at a communication network. Each signal wasn't random. It was part of a web connecting different points across space." He pulled up a three-dimensional map of the local star systems. Red dots marked the locations of signal activity. There were hundreds of them, scattered across dozens of systems. But in the center of the map, there were three systems marked in blue. "What are those?" asked. "That's the interesting part, Commander. Those three systems are where signals go in but nothing comes out. Every other location in the network both sends and receives transmissions. But these three, they only receive." His heart began to beat faster. "Communication hubs." "That's what I thought at first. But hubs would need to relay information. These locations absorb signals and never pass them on. The only explanation I can think of is that they're endpoints, final destinations." Stared at the map. Three star systems. Three locations where communications terminated but never originated. Three places that were important enough to receive constant updates but careful enough to never broadcast their existence. "Bases," she said softly. "Hidden bases." Nodded, his nervousness replaced by excitement. "That's my conclusion too, Commander. The death squads have to be operating from somewhere. Somewhere with supplies, repairs, and communication with their command structure. These three systems fit the profile perfectly." Stood up and walked to the window of her office. Outside, the lights of Earth's capital city stretched to the horizon. Millions of people going about their lives, trusting that someone was protecting them from the dangers of the universe. She thought about the 40,000 who had already died, and the countless more who would die if the attacks continued. For 18 months, humanity had been blind. They had struck from the shadows, confident that their hiding places would never be found. But David, a junior analyst with more curiosity than credentials, had found a crack in their armor. She turned back to face him. "You're sure about this analysis?" "I've triple-checked everything, Commander. The math is solid." Picked up her communicator and made a decision that would change the course of human history. "Admiral, this is Commander. I need an immediate meeting with the Security Council. We found them." The three star systems identified by David were located in what astronomers called the Outer Reach. This was a region of space far from any major civilization, filled with wandering asteroids, dead planets, and ancient radiation from stars that had exploded millions of years ago. It was exactly the kind of place where someone might hide if they didn't want to be found. Commander assembled a team of her best analysts to study the three systems. They worked in a secure room deep beneath the headquarters of the Office of Colonial Intelligence. No windows, no outside communication, no distractions. Just minds and data and the determination to turn their discovery into victory. The initial surveys revealed that each of the three systems contained dozens of large asteroids. Any one of them could potentially hide a base. Scanning them from a distance would be impossible. The detection technology would spot human ships long before they could get close enough for detailed readings. Sat at the head of the conference table, surrounded by her team. Was there, along with veterans like Lieutenant and Doctor, their chief technology specialist. They had been debating options for hours, and frustration was starting to show on every face. "We could send a fleet," suggested. overwhelming force, hit all three systems at once. Doctor shook her head. They would detect our ships the moment they entered the sector. They would scatter before we could engage. Worse, they would know we found them. They would relocate to new hiding spots, and we would be back where we started. What about long-range missiles? Another analyst asked. Fire them from outside detection range. Same problem, replied. Without precise targeting data, we would just be shooting at rocks, and once we fired, they would know we were hunting them. Listen to the discussion without speaking. Her team was thinking like soldiers, looking for ways to attack the enemy with brute force. But force wasn't the answer here. They had better ships, better weapons, and better technology. In a straight fight, humanity would lose. What humanity had was something else, something they clearly didn't expect: cleverness. We're approaching this wrong, said. The room fell silent. We don't need to attack the bases. Not yet. We need to learn everything about them first. How they operate, who commands them, what their weaknesses are. And we need to do it without them knowing we're watching. She stood up and walked to the display screen at the front of the room. I'm proposing a new operation. Code name Ghost Mirror. The goal is simple. We infiltrate the enemy's hidden bases, gather intelligence, and set a trap so perfect that when it springs, they have no chance of escape. Frowned, infiltrate. Commander, they are aliens. We can't exactly send human agents to blend in. We won't use human agents. We'll use something smaller. Pulled up a technical diagram on the screen. It showed a sphere no larger than a grain of sand. Doctor, tell them about the Dust Project. Stood up, her eyes brightening with enthusiasm. For the past 3 years, our engineers have been developing microscopic surveillance drones. We call them dust motes. Each one is equipped with basic sensors, a tiny transmitter, and enough intelligence to navigate independently. They're so small that they register on most sensors as natural cosmic debris. She gestured to the diagram. We could deploy millions of these motes in the 3 target systems. They would drift through space like ordinary dust, completely invisible to standard detection. When they encounter structures, ships, or communication arrays, they record everything and transmit the data back to us. Leaned forward with interest. How do they transmit without being detected? They store data locally until they reach a safe distance, then burst transmit on frequencies that mimic natural radiation. To anyone watching, it looks like background noise. Smiled. It was a thin, cold smile. The smile of a hunter who had finally spotted her prey. Phase 1 of Ghost Mirror is surveillance. We learn everything there is to know about these bases. Phase 2 comes later. She didn't tell them about Phase 2. Not yet. Some plans were too dangerous to share until the moment was right. Over the following weeks, specially modified ships deployed the dust motes in each of the 3 target systems. The ships entered the sector disguised as civilian mining vessels, their military signatures hidden behind layers of electronic camouflage. They released their microscopic cargo and left without incident. They never knew they were there. The first data packets arrived 2 weeks later. What they revealed exceeded most optimistic expectations. The hidden bases were massive. Each one was built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, invisible from the outside but containing entire military complexes within. There were barracks for thousands of soldiers, hangars for dozens of stealth assault ships, armories filled with weapons, and command centers linked to the communication network. More importantly, the dust motes captured something that changed everything. Recordings of conversations between base commanders and officials from the hegemony's ruling council. The death squads weren't rogue elements acting on their own. They were following direct orders from the highest levels of government. This was not a secret war conducted by extremists. This was state-sponsored genocide, approved and directed by the same diplomats who smiled at human ambassadors and expressed sympathy for the tragic attacks. Sat alone in her office late one night, reviewing the evidence. 40,000 humans had died because the leadership had decided they were inconvenient, not because of any threat humanity posed, not because of any dispute over resources or territory, simply because humans had started spreading across the stars, and they wanted to stop them before they became too numerous to control. She thought about her grandmother, who had survived a genocide on Earth nearly a century ago. The old woman had told young stories about those dark times, stories about the importance of memory and justice. "Never forget what happened," her grandmother had said, "and never let it happen again." Made a promise to herself that night, not just to stop the killing, but to make sure the galaxy knew the truth. They had gambled that humanity was too weak and too ignorant to fight back. They were about to learn how badly they had misjudged their victims. Phase 2 of Operation Ghost Mirror required technology that didn't exist yet. Presented her requirements to Doctor and watched the scientist's eyes go wide. "You want to put human operatives inside bases? Commander, that's impossible. The physical differences alone make disguise unfeasible." "I don't need them to disguise themselves as," replied. "I need them to be invisible." What followed was 3 months of frantic development in the most secure laboratory on Earth. The engineers worked with theories that had been considered science fiction just years before. Holographic projection, light-bending materials, and neural interfaces that allowed human operators to control their camouflage with thought alone. The result was a suit that could make its wearer virtually undetectable, not invisible in the true sense, but close enough. The suit projected images of the surrounding environment onto its surface, creating the illusion that there was nothing there. Combined with noise dampening and thermal masking, an operative wearing the suit could walk through a crowded room without being noticed. Selected her best agents for the mission. These were not soldiers but spies. Patient, careful, and capable of operating alone in hostile territory for extended periods. She briefed them personally, explaining exactly what they needed to do. "Your mission is to plant these devices." She held up a small object that looked like an ordinary piece of debris. "Quantum-locked beacons. Once activated, they will broadcast the exact coordinates of each base to every human warship within 50 light-years. At the same time, they will jam all faster-than-light communications." She looked at each of her agents in turn. "When these beacons go live, the death squads will find themselves exposed, surrounded, and cut off from help. They will have two choices: surrender or die." One of the agents, a woman named, raised her hand. "How do we get the beacons inside the bases?" "Through their supply convoys. Our surveillance has mapped their resupply schedules. You will infiltrate the cargo ships, ride them into the bases, plant the beacons, and extract before activation." "And the activation date?" His expression hardened. "1 year from the day of the first attack, the anniversary of New Horizon. I want them to know that we remember our dead." The infiltration began 2 months before the scheduled activation. One by one, his agents slipped aboard supply ships and rode them into the heart of enemy territory. They moved like ghosts through the asteroid bases, avoiding patrols, mapping layouts, and placing beacons in locations where they would be impossible to find. Each agent worked alone, knowing that capture meant certain death and possible torture. They were not known for treating prisoners kindly, but none of them hesitated. They had all lost someone to the death squads: a friend, a family member, a lover. This mission was personal. Reports came back in fragments: beacon planted in base Alpha, beacon planted in base Beta, beacon planted in base Gamma. One by one, the pieces of her trap fell into place. The night before the activation allowed herself a rare moment of doubt. So many things could go wrong. The beacons might malfunction. They might detect the ambush. Her agents might have been compromised without her knowledge. She had bet everything on this operation, and if it failed, there would be no second chance. She walked to the window of her office and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, hidden in the darkness, Thousands of warriors waited for their next mission. They thought they were safe. They thought they were invisible. They thought humanity would never find them. Tomorrow, they would learn otherwise. The activation signal traveled across the stars at faster-than-light speed, reaching all three hidden bases simultaneously at exactly 600 Universal Standard Time. In the command centers of each installation, alarms began to scream. Supreme Commander stood in the control room of Base Alpha when the chaos began. One moment, his tactical display showed nothing but empty space. The next, it lit up with warnings and alerts that made his blood run cold. "What is happening?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the noise. A junior officer looked up with terror in his eyes. "Commander, our stealth systems have been compromised. We're broadcasting on every frequency. Every human ship in the sector can see exactly where we are." Felt the deck shift beneath his feet as the base's orientation systems struggled to compensate for sudden movement. Someone was trying to run, but where could they run to? "Contact the hegemony," he ordered. "Request immediate reinforcement." The communications officer worked frantically at his console before turning back with a look of despair. "I can't, Commander. All faster-than-light channels are jammed. We can't reach anyone outside the system." For the first time in his long career, felt something he had never experienced before: fear. Aboard the flagship of the human Third Fleet, Commander watched the battle unfold through the tactical display. Everything was going according to plan. The three bases were now visible to every sensor in range. Human that had been positioned under the cover of routine patrol exercises were converging from all directions. The trap had sprung perfectly. Admiral stood beside her, his eyes fixed on the display. "All ships are reporting green, Commander. We have them surrounded." Nodded but didn't smile. This wasn't a moment for celebration. This was justice, and justice was serious business. "Open a channel to all bases. Broadcast on all frequencies." The communications officer nodded. "Channel open, Commander." Stepped forward and began to speak. Her voice was calm and clear, carrying across the void to reach the ears of those who had murdered 40,000 innocent people. "Attention all forces. This is Commander of Earth's United Colonial Command. Your hidden bases have been located and surrounded. Your communications with the hegemony have been severed. You have no possibility of escape and no hope of reinforcement." She paused, letting the reality of the situation sink in. "For the past 18 months, you have murdered human colonists. Men, women, and children who posed no threat to your civilization. You killed them in their homes, in their schools, in their beds. You thought you could do this without consequence because you believed we would never find you." Her voice hardened. "You were wrong. You now have a choice. Surrender unconditionally, and you will be treated as prisoners of war. You will receive fair trials for your crimes, and those who were simply following orders may receive mercy. But if you choose to fight, we will destroy your bases and everyone in them. You have 1 hour to decide." She cut the transmission and turned to face Admiral. "Now we wait." Inside Base Alpha, Supreme Commander gathered his officers for an emergency meeting. The situation was worse than he had initially believed. Human ships were closing in from all directions, their weapons already charged and ready. His own fleet of stealth assault ships was designed for attacking defenseless colonies, not for fighting dreadnoughts and carriers. "We could try to break through their lines," one officer suggested without much conviction. Another shook his head. "Their interceptors outnumber our ships 10 to 1. We wouldn't make it past the first engagement." Considered his options. He could order his forces to fight to the last warrior. That was what the code of the hegemony demanded, death before dishonor. But as he looked at the faces of his officers, he saw something that made him hesitate. These were not fanatics. These were soldiers who had followed orders because that was their duty. They had killed humans because the ruling council had told them to. Now the ruling council was silent and they were alone, and death was approaching from all sides. "What are your orders, Commander?" someone asked. Thought about the recordings the humans had surely captured, the communications with the ruling council, the evidence that would prove the hegemony's involvement. Whether he fought or surrendered, that evidence would eventually reach the galaxy. The hegemony would face consequences regardless of what he did now. The only question was whether his soldiers would die for nothing. "Send a message to the human flagship," he said at last. "Tell them we accept their terms." The surrender of Base Alpha triggered a cascade of capitulations. The commander of Base Beta, seeing that resistance was futile, followed suit within 2 hours. Base Gamma attempted to hold out, hoping for a miracle that would never come. When the first wave of human Marines boarded the installations, they found something unexpected. Not fanatical warriors preparing for a final stand, but exhausted soldiers who seemed almost relieved that it was over. The death squads had been told they were elite fighters serving the glory of the hegemony. In the end, they were just pawns abandoned by the masters who had sent them to kill. Commander walked through the corridors of Base Alpha, escorted by armed Marines but never in danger. The prisoners kept their heads down, unwilling or unable to meet her eyes. She felt no satisfaction in their defeat, only a grim sense of duty fulfilled. She found what she was looking for in the command center, a database containing the complete records of the death squad operations, every attack planned, every order received, every colony targeted, and at the top of every document the authorization codes of the ruling council. "Make copies of everything," she told her technicians. "This evidence goes to the Interstellar Tribunal, the Earth government, and every major news network in the galaxy. Let the universe see what the hegemony has done." The aftermath of the operation exceeded anyone's expectations. The evidence captured from the 3 bases proved beyond doubt that the government had planned and ordered the genocide of human colonists. When this information became public, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Alien civilizations that had remained neutral in human affairs suddenly became very interested in containing the threat. The hegemony found itself isolated, its diplomats shunned, its trade networks crumbling. Worse, the revelation triggered a political crisis within society itself. Ordinary citizens had been told that the frontier conflicts were defensive measures against human aggression. Learning that their government had orchestrated unprovoked massacres against civilian populations sparked outrage and demands for accountability. Within 3 months, the ruling council collapsed. New leaders emerged, promising reforms and offering to negotiate peace with humanity. The peace terms were extraordinary: reparations for the victims' families, territorial concessions that expanded human space by 30%, and most importantly, an agreement to face justice. The surviving commanders of the death squads were transferred to the Interstellar Tribunal, where they would stand trial for crimes against sentient life. Commander watched the tribunal proceedings from her office back on Earth. She had declined the invitation to attend in person. She had seen enough of it to last a lifetime. David received a promotion and a medal for his role in discovering the hidden bases. He was uncomfortable with the attention and asked to be assigned to a quiet research position far from the spotlight. Approved the request. Some heroes didn't want to be heroes. They just wanted to do their jobs and keep people safe. Admiral retired shortly after the peace treaty was signed. At his farewell ceremony, he gave a speech that would become famous throughout the colonies. "For a year and a half we lived in fear," he said. "We didn't know where the enemy was hiding or how to stop them. We lost 40,000 brothers and sisters, and we wondered if we would lose 40,000 more. But we never gave up. We never stopped looking. And when we finally found them, we showed the galaxy what humanity is made of." He paused, his old eyes bright with emotion. "We are not the strongest species in the universe. We are not the oldest but we are determined. When someone hurts us, we remember. When someone threatens our families, we fight back. And when someone hides in the darkness, thinking they are safe from justice, we find them. The ceremony ended with a moment of silence for the victims. 40,000 names scrolled across the screen, each one representing a life cut short by weapons. It took nearly 2 hours for all the names to pass. Commander stood alone in her office as the sun set over the capital city. On her desk was a photograph of her grandmother, the woman who had survived one genocide and taught to never let it happen again. "We found them, grandmother," she whispered. "We found them and we made them pay." Outside her window, the lights of the city began to flicker on. Millions of people going about their lives, trusting that someone was watching over them. They would never know how close they had come to destruction. They would never know the names of the agents who had risked everything to plant the beacons, or the analysts who had worked around the clock to crack the enemy's secrets. But that was fine. That was how it should be. Heroes didn't do what they did for recognition. They did it because it was right. Allowed herself a small smile. Tomorrow there would be new threats to analyze, new enemies to watch, new plans to make. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and humanity's place in it was far from secure. But for tonight she could rest. The death squads had been stopped, the guilty would face justice, and 40,000 souls could finally be at peace. She turned off the lights and walked out of her office, leaving the darkness behind.